2008 crisis was previously used to have one economy was up, one economy was down, and then it used to do this. And somebody then said, well, actually, if we all go at the same speed, and we all go together up, that's great. Everybody kind of gets rich together. And interest rates were very low at the time, and people thought, well, this is really good. But of course, what goes up can come down. If you've all gone up together, you're all going to come down together. And that's what happened. And people were scrambling.
Today, our guest is Simon Baig, Vice President of Change Management at Barclays Bank, and I'm super excited to have you here. Do you want to make an introduction?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you very much for inviting me to come along and speak. I graduated from my master's degree in 1996, and I've been working in financial services ever since. And 2000 in banking. So I think like most people of my age, we grew up at a time when there were limited possibilities of what we could do digitally. The internet was finding its way. Google didn't exist at the time. But as we've gone on over time, kind of older people like myself are still quite excited, very excited about what the future holds.
Nice. So, as you said, all of your career you have been working in finance and banking, right?
Yes. So I think for the first 4 years it was analyzing metals markets, non-ferrous. So for those of you who know that, copper, zinc, nickel, that kind of thing. And then in 2000, I joined JP Morgan into the equity derivatives middle office. So pretty much ever since then, I've always been working in a banking environment. Many years in London, and then 5 years in the Middle East in Abu Dhabi, then back to the UK to Edinburgh, where I've been since 2014, so 10 years in Edinburgh, living in Edinburgh but working in Edinburgh, and also currently working in Glasgow. So financial services is one of the few industries where you can get a lot of experience in a lot of different places with without adjusting your skill set too much.
And I haven't ever worked in financial services type of business, but I've heard some things, and maybe it's a stereotype, but I'm very interested in your take on it. So, is it true that in banking finance you work like 7 days a week over the weekend, you do overtime, or in your experience it was more like usual 9 to 5 job type of thing?
No, it's not a 9 to 5 job. You are expected during the busy times to be working very, very hard, very long hours. So if I look at probably the worst that I was working in the run up to the global financial crisis. So get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, a taxi used to pick me up. I was at my desk starting work at 6 a.m. And then if I was finishing at that time, maybe finish about 6 or 7 p.m. And that was called the early shift. If I was then working on a late shift, I used to take my 2 daughters at that time, who were 5 and 3, to nursery school, get the bus to work, start working about 10, 11 a.m., and then finish about 2, 3 a.m. in the morning. And then if I had to work a weekend, then I'd put a full day in on the Saturday. And then probably Sunday evening, I would open up my laptop and just see what's happening. So it's not constant and consistent, but there are periods of time when you will have to work significantly harder for significantly longer to produce results. So I would say that what you were talking about it's a stereotype, but it's a stereotype for a reason, because these work habits do exist.
And is it rewarding in some way? Obviously, maybe financially, but also in terms of developing a skill set. does it help to work those longer shifts and kind of living in that work environment?
There are three things I would say to that. Firstly, it's about you learn resilience. You understand that you can do more, handle more, and take more than you originally thought. You would look from the outside, you would look in and say, it's impossible to do that. And then you do it, and the reality is it's very, very difficult, but you can do it. Do you learn in terms of specific skills? Well, yes, you go from understanding very little about the subject area which you're working in, beyond maybe what you've come out from university, to becoming an expert in it. And so you can look back, if I look back along the path and say, I have learned a lot. So to put me in a position now where I would say there are things which I understand now and are happy and confident to deal with, which if I hadn't taken a career in banking, I wouldn't be. And then the third thing I would say is that in these environments, you are surrounding yourselves with people who are similar to you. So a lot of people in banking normally came first or second in their class through school or through university, and they were used to being at the top. You come into banking and then you're in a team of 30, 40, 50 people, all who came first and second in their class at school and university. And so for some of the younger graduates coming in, it's a very sharp reset, because you're used to looking around and saying, well, I'm number one. And then you turn around, and I had this with younger members of my team. I said, well, if you look across all those desks there, everybody else there was number one or number two. And so then you want to, within that environment, and I think it's probably the same within technology as well, cutting into technology. When you're in that environment, you then say, well, actually, I need to lift my game. Am I going to be able, I won't get frustrated in the fact that people aren't keeping up the same speed as me. But that's not to say, some people can handle it, some people can't handle it. The vast majority of us can handle it. But in those tougher environments, you will learn resilience, you will learn more skills, and you will be put in an environment where everybody around you is quite smart.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and appreciate your insight. You also mentioned it was probably the busiest time in the time of the financial crisis. Are you talking about 2008 and the global crisis then, or?
Well, there were two I've gone through. There's the 1998 Russian ruble crisis and the 2008 crisis. And the 2008 crisis was obviously that happened, and then fairly closely on its heels, COVID happened. So the global economy has taken two very big hits over the last 10, 15 years. So the 2008 crisis was very much a product of economically the governments were trying this thing called synchronization of economies. Because previously you used to have one economy was up, one economy was down, and then it used to do this. And somebody then said, well, actually, if we all go at the same speed, and we all go together up, that's great. Everybody kind of gets rich together. And interest rates were very low at the time, and people thought, well, this is really good. But of course, what goes up can come down. If you've all gone up together, you're all going to come down together. And that's what happened. And people were scrambling. I'm not sure if you remember seeing some of the press reports on the news, people screaming in trading rooms, people getting extremely upset because no matter what they tried to do to save what was happening in their business, their position, whatever it is, they simply couldn't do it. They're literally saying, I'm trying to sell out my position, I can't, there's no buyer for it, or my entire portfolio is going southwards, and there's nothing that I can do to save it. So people were screaming and shouting at each other, but systemically, the system is failing. And that is when you really sat there and thought, whatever happens after we do this, whatever happens, the world will not be the same again.
And what were your top learnings from that crisis and other crises that happened? What should we do to mitigate that, or do you have any other lessons from that?
Well, you can see the mitigation is already happening at the moment. The central banks are putting in place greater regulations on banks. There's greater transparency in reporting. So all the hidden transactions, off-balance sheet transactions, ones which were people couldn't quite see, weren't reported, that's gone. So banks have to be very, very clear about saying, this is where we are, this is what our risk is, and we'll report within our limits. So you could argue that governments and regulators and central banks should have done this beforehand, but it's coming in now. So that's better. You are now faced with a different issue. When I did my SFA exams, so these were broker-dealer exams back in summer of 2000, the teacher stood up and said, look, the rules are in place because the great British investor is A, greedy, and B, stupid. The rules are in place because people want a quick buck. People want to say, hey, if I throw my money at this, I'm going to get 2-3 times my returns. And that fueling of human behavior to say, how do I get rich? Oh, somebody else is there is getting rich. Quick, more. You are never going to take away that human part of demand. All you can do is set the system where it says, if things are getting out of hand, how do we put a brake on this? How do we go, everybody stop, take a breather? And you can see that also with the rise of online gambling sites. And here in the UK, it's very clear. Gambling companies have to put adverts up saying, when you're gambling, put a circuit breaker and put a timeout. So after an hour, you're locked out of the system. You can't do that. So in any change, you can address the infrastructure, what that's going on there. But that rogue part, that human behavior, the demand to get richer faster, you can never legislate that out of existence. You can never you can't tell people you can't feel that way. What you can do is set the system saying, okay, everybody take a pause.
And is it something that central banks or legislation governments start to implement after some of the crises, or is it something that we gradually learn as a society, and now we understand that we have to put those limits in that way?
It goes through cycles. So if you go back to the Great Wall Street crash, in the 1929, 1930, that happened because the rules were very loose and everybody had a great interest in making money. Wall Street crash happens, and then the Glass-Steagall Act is put in to separate investment and commercial banking. Again, to put more rules in place so things like this can't happen again. Go through Second World War, the world gets richer again. Banks say everything's safer again. The rules get loosened again. We then go through a number of crises, and then we go past the crisis, and then everybody goes, okay, it's fine now. We can loosen the rules again. And then we hit another crisis. So we do learn as a society, but we learn in cycles. And then it gets to the point where somebody can't quite remember the reason why you put those rules in place, because it's in a history book somewhere, or they say, well, that could never happen again because everything's different now. So yes, we do learn, you learn quickly after a crisis. We put stuff in place, we grow the rules in time. But in 20 or 30 years' time, somebody will look up and go, actually, we don't need that anymore.
Wow. Yeah, that's an interesting insight on human psychology and behavior. Since you worked in this banking industry for quite a long time, do you have any opinion on crypto and how, well, the whole promise of crypto, as far as I understand, is to decentralize currency, and it's kind of a competitor to traditional banks. So what's your opinion on crypto and Web3?
So I don't know a huge amount about it beyond what I know from currency in what I've got from my master's degree in economics, and between what I can observe and the basis of the technology which is built on. So with money, in effect, anything can be money. So if you go to, probably not a great example, but you go to a prison, cigarettes are money. You will exchange things for cigarettes. Who controls the supply? Who controls, that's coming into it? How many cigarettes are coming into the prison? How many cigarettes are going out, are being smoked? That's in effect lies where your problem lies. With normal money, it's printing, supply, control of it is by a recognized governmental authority. They know exactly how much is going in notes and coins or electronic transactions. They can see it and they can control the supply. You move to crypto, who's controlling supply? So in that standard economics thing, demand, supply, price of scarcity, the rest of it, the supplier then really is in control there. So it then comes down to transparency. If, as an investor, you go into the crypto market and you say, here is an alternative currency to the fiat currencies that are printed, what are you doing it for? Are you using it as a store of value? So you put the money in your bank account and say, I know what it is. Or are you using it as a speculative investment purchase? Maybe take speculative out, using it as an investment purchase. Do you then have transparency? Can you see the nature and the workings of the market? Or can you only see demand when price goes up and people are buying, or when demand falls and price falls? But can you see the supply? Who is the supplier? And I think steps have been taken. I think things are tethered to the dollar. I mean, everything. At some point, if you want to, it's what we call a UGL, an unrealized gain or loss. At some point, you're going to move that money back into your standard home currency. But unless you can clearly observe what is driving that relationship to the euro, the pound, the dollar, you're taking a risk. So I like the idea that the blockchain technology is built on. There's certain things that is there, it's secure. But as an investor, there are risks because the transparency of the market is not the same as it is for normal currencies. That's not to say it's a bad thing, but it's a riskier thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's completely understandable, and I like your take from the point of economics and supply and demand. That's a very interesting way to look at it. Another interesting question to you from me is, what do you think about neobanks? Because some people like them, and from what I understand, and you can correct me, it's like a technology, a platform that allows you to um, do the transactions or manipulate with your money, but like the real money are still in some kind of bank, and they have partnerships with like traditional banks. So what do you think about neobanks, and just any thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think if you're, I think one of probably the biggest examples of that was what Alibaba did in China with I know they have the Alipay platform. I'm not sure the precise name for the banking services they were offering, and it's a strong proposition. So if you're saying, okay, we will collect deposits, because you have to collect really deposits then to be able to operate on a banking basis and a banking license. And if you're able to do this, you're able to back your transactions with a larger organization. Well, then you're fulfilling customer demand. Customers want it, they can use it. They can then, depending on the depositor protection regime, if I'm signing with a neobank and I'm giving them 10,000 euros, I'm going to want to know that should something happen, those 10,000 euros are safe. And if you're saying the neobank model says, okay, well, actually, yes, we do have them deposited with Bank of China or whoever it is, Paribas, whoever it is, then I, as a customer, take satisfaction from that. So that's one thing about part of my mind. So, okay, is my money safe? Yes, you're telling me my money's safe, fine. The other part then is, as a customer, if you're giving me better agility, a better deal, better rates, better everything, and I can do everything from the comfort of my phone or home, then yes, you now made me a very interesting proposition where I am now going to maybe not give you all my money, but I'm certainly going to invest part of my money with you because you're giving me better. again, it boils down to the fact that if there is customer demand, if there's real demand for these for neobanks, then they will succeed. If they manage their risk properly, if they manage their customer transaction cycles properly, they will succeed, and that's good. So, what differentiates one bank from another bank? Customer service and customer complaints. So if you as a customer are happy, you'll continue banking with them. If you're unhappy and you complain, the bank can either fix it and you still stay with them, or they don't fix it and you leave. So ultimately, neobanks will succeed on the basis that the product they're offering is so compelling that people want to do it, and the service they give when things go bad is of an equal standard to a traditional bank.
Yeah, I love your take on that. Because I also do love neobanks. At least from maybe I'm just a younger person, but having like a very nice like UI UX in your
Yeah.
website, your phone, it's much better than many of the traditional banks.
It's kind of what you grew up with, though, isn't it? So I grew up at a time when if I wanted to pay my electricity bill, I had to give up 30 minutes of my lunch hour, queue in a shop at the post office, write a check, and pay it. And internet banking came along. It's like, this is great. So every generation expects better. So I'm Generation X. So we're called digital immigrants. We didn't have digital when we came along, but in our 20s, it started becoming more part of our life. Then the millennials came along, and they grew up much more with having the internet around. The next generation, on Generation Z, has grown up with apps. It's grown up with the ability to turn around and say, "It's not. I want to be able to press something. I want it. It feels smooth. It feels good. I'm getting a sense of well-being through this." There is a trade-off, though, and so in the fact that if my laptop goes wrong, I grew up at the time when I could be able to access the DOS, the disk operating system, and recode a couple of things so my machine ran in a different way. You can't do that now. And literally, you physically can't. You can't open up your app and change how your app works. But it's much better than it used to be in our time. So as long as you have trust in what you're doing, you have trust in the institution that sits behind the app, then that's the way forward. And I'm very focused on risk management. If it looks good, feels good, and you feel happy and safe with it, fantastic, go for it. If it looks good, feels good, but something doesn't feel quite right about it, well, then you've got 100 other alternatives, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned you work with risk management, and also I'm just curious, what is your like day to day, or what do you do as a VP of specifically change management at the bank? So maybe it's like stakeholder relationships or operations. Can you walk us through that?
Well, first of all, I'll give you the standard cliche answer that every day is different. And this is true, as it is. However, what I think was the point, a change manager is almost like running your own business because you have clients to service. You've got people who are giving things to you, effectively your suppliers, and you've got to make sure that everything works. You get what is needed to launch on time to the market, depending on who you're dealing with. So the focus very much is around who am I working for? I'm working for my internal client, and they want to say, I want to go from like this to like this, and you've got to make that change. And you've got to measure the change, and you've got to make sure that everybody's moving along at the same speed. So like any startup business, you say, here's my plan. This is what I'm going to do. I've got an idea. It starts here. Who do I need to get involved to make sure that I can deliver at that point in the future to the standard that is required. Now, in life, nothing runs perfectly. Nothing runs smoothly. So there will be days when you sit there going, this is great. And then somebody calls you up and goes, I've got a bit of a problem here. And so the first thing that you need to do then as a change manager and say, give me quantitative and qualitative definition of what the problem is. How long is this what we call a showstopper? Literally, do we have to get everybody stop? We've got to figure this out. Or can we say it's a smaller problem? We can do that on the side as we continue. And so so being a change manager is, you've always got one eye on what the final thing is, but you're watching as you're juggling the different priorities, the different work streams. And if you're fortunate enough, you will have partners and stakeholders around you, people are supplying into you and you're producing for, that are understanding of the fact that stuff is not simple, and sometimes they need to come and help you. And I'll finish off with the critical point is, if something goes wrong, speak about it early. Because the last thing you want to do is everybody says everything's gone fine, and you say, actually, a week ago that went wrong. So just keep those lines of communication open and just be honest.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I like how you said it. It's almost like running your own business inside an organization. And it relates to my next question, because the way we met online was you reacted to my LinkedIn post about our acceleration program with our startup. And you told me that you support people who like to build, who try to do something themselves. And I have two questions. First, why do you like those people? Why do you support them? And do you have any advice that you would give them?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a great fan of people who get up in the morning and say, I'm going to make the world a better place. I've got an idea. I've got, it'll either change the life of 10 people, or change the life of 10,000 people, or 10 million people. But you are a person who wants to stand up and say, I've got an idea of how I can make things better. Tick one for me. The second one is, why do I want to support people like this? I am, as I've already said before, I'm 52. I've been doing this for a while. I've been very focused on my own career. And I think it's within my own mind and mindset, it's time. I'm at a point where I can start giving something back, and be happy about doing it and spending time to do that. So so when I saw your idea, and I thought it's a good idea. It's a great idea. There may be a couple of things which maybe need tweaking there. So I thought, well, I'll put the comment out there. You were very kind and came back, and we had a conversation about it. So it's you're putting your hand up to say you want to make the world a better place, and I'm very happy to help you do that. In terms of advice, have the three pieces of advice I would give. Number one, just have your clear goal in mind. What are you attempting to do? And just stick to it. Number two, if for some reason on this journey you've made a mistake, then the phrase "a step backwards is a step towards progress," because you're pulling yourself back from the mistake and saying, okay, I need to go over there and make it right. And the third thing I would say is, in this kind of conversation that we're having here, is find somebody who's been around for a while, somebody who's positive, and say, would you mind spending a little bit of time talking about this idea with me? Because they might be able to give you an insight into something, just that exchange of human psychology. And sometimes it's nice to break out of if you surround yourselves around like-minded people, everybody go, yeah, it's great. And you might just meet somebody who says, hang on a sec. You might want to consider a slightly different angle. So yeah, so that's why I do it. And I think there's three things that any startup should be considering.
Yeah, thank you for advice. And I think that was the last question. Unless you have something you want to share, maybe as the last word with the audience, maybe with a young entrepreneur listening to the podcast.
Yeah, I would say this to any young entrepreneur: stay firm on your mind and your path. You have an idea. You want to make the world a better place. just keep putting one foot in front of the other, keep going, and fingers crossed you'll make it to your destination.
Nice,
But anyway,
nice.
thank you, Danny,
Uh,
thank you for inviting me in to speak.
Thank you, Simon. I'm glad you were here, and thanks for coming. I'm super excited to have you and grateful for your advice and your story and your experience.
It's great. Thank you again.